Hello everyone, and welcome to my YNR official 24 channel. Mariah was shocked when she discovered Matt's true identity, not in the casual, stunned for a moment way people tend to use the word shocked, but in the bone-deep, breath-snatching, world-tilting sense that makes sound fall away and reality feels suddenly rearranged. It happened on a bleak, gray afternoon, the kind that made the entire town feel hushed and strangely hollow, as if the sky itself were holding its breath. She had gone to confront him, determined to force out of him the truth that had been needling her instincts for weeks, but even her worst suspicions hadn't prepared her for the rupture that followed. She had marched into the abandoned community center, the place he claimed to be using as a makeshift studio for one of his vague projects, expecting evasions, excuses, maybe even a confession about some small betrayal, but not this. The scent of old paper and cold concrete clung to the air, the way forgotten spaces tend to keep secrets inside their walls, and at first she thought the silence meant he wasn't there. But then she heard it, the faint scrape of something heavy being dragged across the floor. She turned the corner, braced for anything except the sight that greeted her. Matt, or the man she thought was Matt, hunched over an old metal table piled with documents, photos, and a laptop filled with files that looked more like classified intelligence than anything belonging to the quiet, slightly awkward guy she believed she knew. He froze when he realized she was watching him, his shoulders tensing, his entire demeanor shifting in a way that made her stomach clench. His eyes weren't confused or scared or guilty. They were calculating. Cold. Completely unfamiliar. And when he straightened, standing slowly, deliberately, she had the surreal sensation of watching an illusion dissolve, like a mask melting away to reveal the contours of a stranger underneath. "Mariah," he said, his voice lower, straighter, stripped of the hesitant warmth she had grown accustomed to. "You weren't supposed to be here." The words were soft, but they struck her with the force of something explosive. She didn't understand. Not yet. But she knew, instantly and instinctively, that the man in front of her was not the person she had let into her life, her trust, her hopes. She demanded answers, shaky, breathless demands that spilled from her before she could sort them into coherent questions, but he only watched her with the unsettling composure of someone who had rehearsed for this moment, someone who had known all along that the truth would eventually claw its way out. He looked almost sympathetic, which terrified her more than anger would have. Finally, as if deciding there was no point in sustaining the performance, he exhaled and said, "My name is not Matt." It never was. And the ground inside her shifted. He told her everything, or at least everything he claimed was real. His true name, his real mission, the organization that had sent him, the target he had been tracking long before he ever walked into her orbit. He said her meeting him had been accidental at first, an unpredictable variable, but later, not so accidental. He needed access, proximity, cover. She was convenient. The words sliced through her, merciless and surgically precise, but he continued speaking with the calm precision of someone giving a weather report. He explained that the man Mariah had fallen for, the man she had defended and believed in and confided in, was nothing but a persona, a carefully constructed facade designed to be likable, trustworthy, disarming. Matt had been engineered for her. Every awkward smile. Every carefully clumsy joke. Every moment of vulnerability. She felt her breath catch in her chest, a tightness clawing upward until it lodged somewhere between her ribs and her throat, because that meant none of it, had ever been real. She felt sick. She felt foolish. She felt betrayed in a way that made her vision swim with heat. But beneath all of that, pounding hard enough to blur everything else around it, was a spark of fury. He watched her reaction with the eerie calm of someone observing an experiment unfold exactly as expected. She wanted to scream at him, hit him, drag the truth out of him with her bare hands if she had to. But her body wouldn't move. She could only stare at him, frozen in a moment that felt stretched so thin it might crack. When she finally found her voice, it came out strangled. "So what was I? A distraction? A pawn? A tool?" the word tasted poisonous. He didn't deny it. Not at first. His silence was answer enough, and she felt something inside her twist so violently she thought it might tear. Finally, he spoke with a softness that made her want to recoil. You weren't supposed to get hurt. The contradiction was almost laughable. Her life had been detonated by him. Every moment she had shared with him now felt retroactively tainted, rewritten, like pages of a story she had thought she was co-authoring but had actually only been reading aloud from a script he'd handed her. But then something in his expression shifted, just slightly, a flicker, a fracture. It was gone in an instant, replaced by the cold veneer he kept trying to maintain, but she saw it. A hint of guilt. Or grief. Or something human. She latched onto it, desperate for some foothold in the crumbling landscape of her emotions. Was anything real? She whispered. And for the first time since she arrived, he looked away. That was an answer, too. He said he had never intended to involve her. He had never expected himself to care, never anticipated the conflict that would come from lying to her day after day, never predicted that pretending would become indistinguishable from feeling. His voice cracked, infinitesimally, almost imperceptibly, but she saw it. Heard it. Felt it. And she hated that some part of her still cared about his answer. She hated that the truth felt like losing him twice, once as the man she loved, and again as the stranger he truly was. She backed away from him, stumbling into a chair, the cold metal biting into her legs. Her head spun with the avalanche of revelations. He knew far too much about her life, about Noah, about Sharon, about everything she had confided in him during their late-night talks when she believed she was safe. He had collected her words like data points. Her past, her fears, her hopes. All of it catalogued. All of it leveraged. She demanded to know why he was telling her now, why he didn't just continue lying, why he didn't disappear. His answer chilled her more than anything else, because they're coming for you now. The organization he worked for had lost patience, he explained. They believed she knew something she didn't even realize she possessed. A detail connected to a USB drive that had gone missing months earlier, a detail she had overheard during an argument between two people she thought were strangers. She had forgotten about it entirely. They had not. And now Matt, or whoever he truly was beneath the layers of deception, claimed he was trying to keep her alive. The absurdity of it slapped her across the face. He was her protector. Her liar, her manipulator, her destroyer, suddenly wanting to be her savior. She didn't trust him. She couldn't trust him. But he spoke with a conviction she didn't know how to ignore, and there was something in his eyes, something raw, something frightened, that suggested he wasn't lying now, even if he had lied about everything else. Before she could decide whether to run from him, scream at him, or try to punch him in the face, the back door of the community center slammed open. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway. Voices followed, low, sharp, urgent. Matt, no, the man, grabbed her wrist, his touch firm but not painful, and pulled her toward a side exit. She yanked her hand away, furious at the instinctive part of her that still felt safer with him than without him. Do you want to live? He hissed. It wasn't a threat. It was a plea. Against her better judgment, against every instinct screaming at her that he was the reason for the danger in the first place, she followed him. The next minutes blurred together, dark corridors, the sound of boots pounding on concrete, the crash of something metallic hitting the floor behind them. He led her through a maze of sublevels she hadn't even known existed, all while explaining in rapid fragments the layers of conspiracy she had accidentally stumbled into, how every choice she made since that overheard argument had rippled into consequences she couldn't see. By the time they emerged into the cold air behind the building, Mariah felt like the world had become a puzzle with half its pieces missing and the picture on the box had been painted by a liar. They ran through the alley, past dumpsters and flickering streetlights, until they reached a rusted car that looked like it hadn't been driven in years. He shoved open the door, urging her inside, and though she hesitated, she climbed in, her pulse hammering so violently she thought it might burst. As the engine roared to life, far too loud, far too angry to belong to something so old, she turned to him, her voice quivering with rage, fear, and desperation. "Who are you really?" His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Someone who made a mistake," he said quietly. "And someone who's trying to fix it before it gets you killed." She hated that answer. She hated him. She hated herself for still searching his voice for the traces of the man she thought she knew. They sped through the empty streets, the city blurring past in streaks of shadow and light, and with every turn, Mariah felt both further from her old life and deeper into a nightmare she didn't choose. She didn't know what awaited them. She didn't know if she could ever forgive him. She didn't know if she wanted to. But she knew one thing with absolute, earth-shaking clarity: discovering Matt's true identity had not been the end of something. It was only the beginning. The car skidded around a sharp corner, tires screeching in protest, and Mariah braced herself against the dashboard as the world outside blurred into a chaotic swirl of dim streetlights and empty sidewalks. Her pulse thudded relentlessly in her ears, each beat echoing with the same horrifying truth: the man beside her, this stranger wearing Matt's face, Matt's voice, Matt's memories, had built every moment of their relationship on a foundation of manipulation. And yet she was depending on him now, racing through the night inside a vehicle that smelled faintly of engine oil and old leather, trusting him with her safety despite every instinct shouting that he had already shattered it. She stared at him in profile, the rigid set of his jaw, the flicker of tension around his eyes, and the eerie calm that seemed to cloak him even in the thick of danger. It was wrong. Unnatural. But what terrified her more was the shard of something familiar she could still see in him, the way his brow furrowed when he concentrated, the quick, darting glances he threw at her to check if she was hurt, the faint tremor in his voice when he exhaled. Those were traits she recognized, behaviors she had believed came from the real Matt, the gentle, genuine man she thought she'd come to understand. Now she didn't know what behaviors were manufactured and which were accidental leaks of the person hidden beneath the persona. He drove fast but not recklessly, weaving through back roads and side streets Mariah didn't even know existed, as if he had studied the layout of the city with military precision. She asked again, angrier this time, the words spilling from her like broken glass, how he knew such routes, what organization he worked for, why she was suddenly valuable enough to be hunted through the night. His grip tightened on the wheel, knuckles whitening. "I'll explain everything when we're safe." She hated those words. They were the same kind of vague assurances he had used to manipulate her trust before, to steer her away from questions he didn't want to answer. Safety felt like a myth now, something distant and unreachable, something he didn't get to promise her anymore. "Explain now," she demanded, her voice shaking with the fury she could barely contain. "I deserve that. After everything you..." She cut herself off before the emotion cracked her voice open entirely. He inhaled deeply, exhaling through his teeth as if weighing every syllable in advance. Finally, he spoke. "My name is Cade." The word hit her like a physical blow. Short. Sharp. Foreign. A name she had never heard before, yet one he said with the weight of someone who hadn't used it aloud in years. "Cade," she repeated, disbelief clinging to each letter. "That's who you really are." He nodded once, eyes fixed on the road. "It's the name I was given at birth. The rest, the identities, the covers, the histories, those change. This one doesn't." She swallowed hard, forcing back the swell of anger and confusion. "And what are you? Some kind of spy? Criminal? Mercenary? It's complicated." "Then simplify." His jaw tightened. "I work, for a private intelligence collective. Not government. Not officially anything. We were contracted to track high-value information breaches and recover sensitive data before it hit public channels or black markets." The words were clinical, almost sterile, but they sat heavy in the air between them. Months ago, he continued, a classified program went missing. A digital prototype. Stolen by someone inside the corporate sphere, someone with enough connections to disappear quickly. Mariah felt a cold shard of fear settle in her chest. She didn't fully understand what he was describing, but she understood enough to realize she had become tangled in something dangerously bigger than herself. "And you think I'm involved?" she asked bitterly. "You think I stole something?" "No," he shook his head immediately, fiercely. "You're not a suspect. But you overheard something you shouldn't have, and now certain people believe you're a liability." She frowned, unable to piece it together. "I don't even remember overhearing anything important." "You wouldn't," he said softly. "It was a small detail. A name. A timestamp. Something they didn't plan for anyone to hear." Her breath caught. A memory flickered, 2 men arguing outside the grotto months earlier, voices low but tense. She hadn't thought much of it. In fact, she'd forgotten the encounter almost entirely. But she did remember one of them whispering angrily about a deadline and the file not landing where it was supposed to. At the time she assumed they were fighting about late paperwork or failed deliveries. Now the context had changed entirely. "But why didn't you just tell me?" she whispered, anger fighting exhaustion in her voice. "Why pretend to be someone else? Why make me?" She stopped herself again, because the next words hurt too much to push out. "It wasn't supposed to involve you," he repeated. "I wasn't supposed to get close. I wasn't supposed to." His voice trailed off, and the silence he left behind was thick enough to choke on. She knew what he meant. She felt the echo of it burning in her chest, the betrayal layered with something more complicated and painful. He wasn't supposed to care. But he had. And somehow, despite everything, despite the lies and the manipulation and the danger now pressing against her like suffocating fog, part of her believed he meant that. The night outside deepened as he drove farther from the city's main roads, the glow of street lamps giving way to the dim outlines of trees and open landscapes. "Where are we going?" she asked warily. "Safe house," he said. "Remote. Hard to track. Temporary. And after that?" "After that," he said slowly, "we decide what comes next." The uncertainty in his voice made her stomach twist. When they reached the edge of town, he pulled onto a dirt road she had never noticed before. The car jolted over uneven ground, and she clutched the door handle as branches scraped against the windows. Eventually they arrived at a small cabin tucked behind a cluster of pine trees, almost invisible in the thick darkness. He parked quickly and scanned the area before motioning for her to follow him inside. The interior was sparse but functional, clean, stocked with supplies, and eerily quiet. Too quiet. Mariah stayed near the doorway, refusing to step farther in. "I'm not going anywhere with you until you tell me everything," she said firmly. He didn't argue. Instead, he moved to the center of the room, leaning against the edge of the wooden table. The cabin's dim lighting cast shadows across his features, making him look even less like the Matt she once knew. "The prototype they're looking for," he began, "isn't just a file. It's an adaptive AI. Self-learning. Self-structuring. Capable of rewriting its own architecture. In the wrong hands, it could compromise entire systems, financial, medical, governmental. Anything connected." Mariah felt a chill crawl up her spine. She had heard of similar concepts before, mostly in speculative articles or theoretical discussions, but nothing that sounded this advanced, or this dangerous. "Nikki Newman stole it," he continued, and the words hit Mariah like a punch. Nikki? Elegant, composed, powerful Nikki Newman. Cade nodded, reading the disbelief on her face. She didn't intend for it to spiral. She thought she could leverage it, use it to expose corruption, maybe even protect people she cared about. But the moment she took it, Every shadow organization with a stake in global data security started hunting for it. Including us. Mariah sat down hard on the nearest chair, her knees suddenly weak. Nikki had always carried secrets like they were part of her jewelry collection, sparkling, heavy, meant to dazzle and distract, but this was beyond anything Mariah could have imagined. So the USB, she whispered. The one